The iron shackles of debt had bound her father for 3 years, and now Penelope Turner stood in the dusty parlor of their failing ranch watching that debt pass from one man's ledger to another man's conscience. Her father had died 2 weeks prior, thrown from a spooked horse during a lightning storm that had split the Colorado sky like God's own fury. Samuel Turner had been a good man once, before the drought of 1881 killed half their cattle and forced him to borrow money from men who dealt in desperation. The loan had come from a cattle baron in Denver, a man Penelope had never met but whose interest rates had strangled their ranch as surely as a noose. When her father couldn't pay, he had signed papers in his delirium, papers that Penelope discovered only after his funeral. Papers that promised his daughter's hand in marriage to whomever held the debt, as collateral for the remaining balance of $800. The cattle baron had sold that debt, as men did with troublesome obligations, and it had changed hands twice before landing in the possession of a cowboy named Warren Ellis. He arrived on a Tuesday morning in late August of 1883, riding a paint horse that looked as travel-worn as its rider. Penelope watched him from the window as he dismounted, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt that sat easy on his hips, the leather worn smooth from use. She met him at the door before he could knock, her chin raised in defiance even as her heart hammered against her ribs. She was 21 years old, and she had prepared herself for this moment, had steeled herself to accept whatever fate those papers demanded. Her younger brother Jacob was only 16 and needed her. The ranch, such as it was, needed someone to keep it from falling completely to ruin. If she had to marry a stranger to keep a roof over Jacob's head, then that was what she would do. Warren Ellis removed his hat when he saw her, revealing a face that was younger than she had expected, perhaps 27 or 28, with gray eyes that held something she couldn't quite read. Not cruelty, which she had braced herself for, but not kindness either. Wariness, perhaps. Caution. "Miss Turner," he said, his voice low and rough-edged, the accent pure Colorado with hints of somewhere farther south. "My name is Warren Ellis. I expect you know why I am here." "I know," she said, and was proud that her voice didn't shake. "The papers are inside. Everything is in order." He studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes taking in her faded calico dress, her work-roughened hands, the proud set of her shoulders. She stared back, refusing to lower her gaze, letting him see that she wouldn't cower. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and she knew she looked thin, worn down by grief and hard work, but she wouldn't apologize for what poverty had made of her. "May I come in?" he asked, and it was a question, not a demand. She stepped aside, and he entered the small house, ducking slightly through the doorframe. The parlor was shabby but clean, the furniture old but cared for. Jacob sat at the table, his young face hostile, his hands clenched into fists. He had their father's red hair and quick temper, and Penelope had spent the past 2 weeks talking him out of various foolish plans to solve their situation. Warren's gaze moved from Jacob to the papers that lay on the table, then back to Penelope. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my brother," Penelope said firmly. Warren nodded slowly, then moved to the table. He picked up the papers, reading through them with an expression that grew harder with each line. When he finished, he set them down with a controlled precision that spoke of tightly leashed anger. "Your father signed these," he said. "He was dying," Jacob burst out. "They got him drunk and delirious and made him sign away his own daughter like she was livestock." Warren's jaw tightened. "I expect that is exactly what happened." He looked at Penelope. Did you know about this before he passed? No, she said. I found them among his papers after the funeral. And you have had 2 weeks to disappear, to run, to find some way out of this agreement, Warren said slowly. But you are still here. Where would I go? Penelope asked, bitter humor touching her voice. And what about Jacob? This is our home, poor as it is. I won't leave my brother to starve. Warren pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. After a moment's hesitation, she sat across from him, with Jacob remaining standing, tense and ready for trouble. I bought this debt 3 days ago, Warren said. Paid $600 for it, which was a fool's bargain since the ranch isn't worth half that in its current state. The man who sold it to me thought he was getting the better end of the deal, getting rid of a worthless property and an obligation that would bring him nothing but trouble. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady on Penelope's face. I bought it because I have spent the last 5 years hunting down every piece of paper that bears Samuel Turner's signature, trying to clear a debt that should never have existed in the first place. Penelope felt the world tilt slightly. What are you talking about? Warren was quiet for a long moment, and something old and painful moved behind his eyes. 10 years ago, my father was a ranch hand working for yours. Good man, hard worker, honest to a fault. There was an accident, a barn fire. Some cattle died and equipment was destroyed. The foreman blamed my father, said he had been smoking in the barn despite that being forbidden. My father didn't smoke, never had, but the foreman insisted, and your father believed him. My father was not only fired but forced to pay for the damages, money he didn't have. The debt followed him for 5 years, through 3 different holders, the interest compounding until it broke him. He died of a heart attack when I was 22, still owing money for a crime he didn't commit. The silence in the room was absolute. Penelope felt cold, then hot, then cold again. My father did that. Your father believed a lie, Warren said, his voice carefully neutral. The foreman was the one smoking, was the one who caused the fire. He blamed my father to save his own skin. I learned the truth 2 years ago when the foreman was dying and wanted to clear his conscience. By then, my father was 5 years in the ground and Samuel Turner was drowning in his own debts. I couldn't hate him the way I wanted to. He had been deceived just like my father. Jacob had gone very still. So you bought up his debts to what? Get revenge? I bought them to understand them, Warren said. To see how a man could fall so far so fast. And what I found was a trail of vultures and liars, men who loan money to desperate people and then bleed them dry. The kind of men who would get a dying man drunk enough to sign away his daughter. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a box of matches. Before either Penelope or Jacob could react, he struck one and held it to the corner of the papers. The flame caught, and he held the burning documents over the empty fireplace, letting them fall into the grate as ash. "What are you doing?" Penelope gasped, jumping to her feet. "Canceling the debt," Warren said calmly. "You owe me nothing, not money, not marriage, not servitude, nothing." Jacob's face had gone from hostile to confused. "I don't understand." Warren stood, brushing ash from his fingers. "There is nothing to understand. The debt is paid in full. This ranch is yours, free and clear. I will file the proper papers in Leadville to make it legal." Penelope's mind reeled. "You paid $600 just to burn the papers." "I paid $600 to sleep at night," Warren said quietly. "My father died under the weight of a debt that wasn't his fault. I won't be the man who forces a woman into marriage because of papers signed under duress." He moved toward the door, placing his hat back on his head. Penelope followed him, her thoughts a chaotic tangle. At the door, he paused and turned back to her. "The ranch needs work," he said. "A lot of work. You are short on cattle, your fences are falling down, and you will need help getting through the winter." If you are willing, I will stay on as a hand. You would pay me standard wages when you can afford it, and until then I will work for room and board." "Why would you do that?" Penelope demanded. "You have done more than enough already." Those gray eyes met hers, and she saw something vulnerable in them, something that made her breath catch. "Because you deserve a choice," he said softly. "Maybe for the first time in a long while, you deserve to make your own choice about your own life, but I would like to help if you will let me. Not because of debt or obligation, but because it is the right thing to do." He paused, and a faint, almost shy smile touched his mouth. "And because when you opened that door this morning, ready to face down whatever came through it with your head high and your shoulders back, I thought you were about the bravest person I had ever seen. I would like to know you better, Miss Turner, but only if you want that too. You owe me nothing but time, if you are willing to give it." Penelope stood frozen in the doorway, watching this strange cowboy who had just upended everything she thought she knew about her situation. He was walking back to his horse, and she realized suddenly that if she let him ride away, she might never see him again. The thought created an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. "Wait," she called out. He turned, his hand on his horse's reins. "We have a spare room," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "It is not much, but it is clean. And I can cook, not fancy, but no one has ever starved at my table. If you are serious about staying on as a hand, if you truly mean what you said about choice, then I choose to say yes." The smile that spread across Warren Ellis's face transformed it, chasing away the wariness and revealing something warm and genuine. "Then I will fetch my gear." That was how Warren Ellis came to live at the Turner Ranch, and that was how Penelope began to learn that freedom, real freedom, was a more precious gift than she had ever imagined. The first days were awkward, all three of them dancing around each other, trying to establish a rhythm. Warren proved to be a man of his word, throwing himself into the work with a tireless energy that put them all to shame. He repaired fences until his hands bled, then wrapped them and kept working. He cleared brush, mended the barn roof, and assessed their cattle situation with a practiced eye that spoke of years of experience. At meals, which Penelope insisted they take together, he was quiet but not sullen, answering questions when asked but not volunteering much about himself. Jacob slowly thawed from hostile to grudgingly respectful, especially after Warren spent an evening teaching him how to better handle a rope, patiently correcting his technique without making him feel foolish. Penelope watched Warren when she thought he wasn't looking, trying to reconcile this hard-working, soft-spoken man with the image she had built in her head of whoever would come to collect on her father's debt. He was younger than she had expected, and there was a loneliness about him that resonated with her own. He had lost his father just as she had lost hers, had spent years carrying anger and grief, trying to make sense of injustice. One evening, about a week after his arrival, she found him sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the mountains. The August heat had broken into a pleasant coolness, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. She brought him coffee, and he accepted it with a nod of thanks. For a while they sat in companionable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Penelope said finally. "Of course." "When you burned those papers, did you know you were going to do that before you arrived, or did you decide in the moment?" Warren considered the question. "I knew I wasn't going to hold you to them," he said slowly, "but I hadn't decided exactly what I would do until I saw your face. You were so ready to go through with it, to sacrifice yourself for your brother. It made me angry, not at you, but at the whole rotten system that would put you in that position. Burning them seemed like the only appropriate response." "You could have just given them back to me," Penelope pointed out. "No," Warren said firmly. As long as those papers existed, someone could have claimed them, could have used them against you. Burning them was the only way to be sure. Penelope sipped her coffee, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the hot liquid. You said you wanted to know me better. That goes both ways, you know. I would like to know you better too. He glanced at her, something hopeful flickering in his eyes. What would you like to know? Everything, she said simply. Where you come from, what you have done in the years since your father died, why you were willing to spend $600 on a debt that had nothing to do with you personally. It had everything to do with me personally, Warren said quietly. My father died because of your father's debt to him. In a roundabout way, our families have been tangled up together for a decade. I wanted to untangle that knot, to make something right in a world that had been wrong for too long. Over the next hour, as the sky darkened and stars began to emerge, Warren told her his story. He had grown up on a small ranch in southern Colorado, the only son of a ranch hand and a school teacher. When his father died, his mother had remarried within a year, a shopkeeper who didn't want a grown Stepson around. Warren had struck out on his own at 22, working as a ranch hand, a trail driver, even a stint as a deputy in a small town outside Denver. He had saved his money carefully, living lean with one goal in mind, to make enough to buy back his father's good name, to clear the debt that had killed him. I thought if I could do that, I could finally let go of the anger, Warren said, staring out at the dark shapes of the mountains. I thought it would bring me peace, and maybe it has a little, but mostly I just feel tired of carrying all that weight around. So why stay here? Penelope asked softly. You have done what you set out to do. You could go anywhere, do anything. Warren turned to look at her, and in the dim light from the house, his face was all plains and shadows. Because for the first time in 5 years, I don't feel like I am running towards something or away from something. I feel like maybe I could just be somewhere. And this somewhere, with you and Jacob trying to hold this place together through sheer stubbornness, it feels like somewhere worth being. Penelope's heart did a strange little skip. We are pretty stubborn, she admitted. It is one of your better qualities, Warren said, and there was a smile in his voice. She found herself smiling back, and for a moment the weight of the past weeks lifted. They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and watching the stars, and Penelope thought that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all the pain and loss. As summer turned toward autumn, the work on the ranch continued. Warren's presence made an enormous difference, not just in the physical labor but in the knowledge and experience he brought. He knew cattle in a way that Penelope and Jacob didn't, understood the rhythms and needs of ranch life from years of hard-won experience. He suggested they drive the remaining cattle to better grazing land before winter, and he showed Jacob how to read the signs of weather and season. He helped Penelope plan out what supplies they would need to get through the cold months, working through the math of their meager finances with a patience that made her want to weep with relief. For so long, she had been the only one holding everything together, and now there was someone to share that burden, but it was more than just the practical help. Warren had a quiet presence that steadied her, a way of listening that made her feel heard. He didn't talk down to her or assume he knew better simply because he was a man. He asked her opinion, respected her knowledge of the ranch and the land, and when they disagreed, they talked it through until they found a solution that satisfied them both. Jacob blossomed under Warren's mentorship, losing some of the angry desperation that had clung to him since their father's death. He followed Warren around like a devoted puppy, soaking up everything the older man could teach him about ranching, horses, and life. Warren was patient with him in a way that made Penelope's throat tight with gratitude. One day in mid-September, Warren and Penelope rode out to check on the cattle in the north pasture. The aspens were turning gold, and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter was coming. They rode side by side, comfortable in each other's company in a way that had developed over the weeks of living and working together. "Jacob is doing well," Warren observed. "He has good instincts with the cattle. He loves it," Penelope said. "He always did, even when our father was alive." "I think he blamed himself a little for not being able to do more to save the ranch." "He was a child," Warren said. "The ranch wasn't his responsibility to save." "It wasn't mine either," Penelope said quietly. "But I am the older sibling, and when our mother died 5 years ago, I became the woman of the house. I did what I had to do." Warren was quiet for a moment. "Your mother died 5 years ago. Pneumonia," Penelope said. "She got caught in a storm, was soaked to the skin, and took ill. She was gone within a week." The old grief was still there, but time had blunted its sharpest edges. "That was when things started to go bad with the ranch. My father was never the same after she died. He made poor decisions, trusted the wrong people. I think he was just tired of fighting." "I am sorry," Warren said, and the sincerity in his voice made her eyes sting with tears she refused to shed. "It was a long time ago," she said, which wasn't true but was what she needed to say. They reached the north pasture and dismounted to walk among the cattle. Warren counted heads and checked their condition with a practiced eye. Penelope watched him work, admiring the easy confidence in his movements, the gentle way he handled the animals. "They are in good shape," Warren said finally. "Another few weeks of this grazing and they will be strong enough for winter." "That is good news," Penelope said. She hesitated, then added, "Warren, I want to thank you, not just for the work, but for everything. For giving us a chance to keep this place, for treating Jacob and me like partners instead of charity cases. It means more than I can say." Warren turned to face her, and there was an intensity in his gray eyes that made her breath catch. "It isn't charity, Penelope. You and Jacob work as hard as anyone I have ever met. This ranch will survive because of your determination, not because of anything I have done." "You have done more than you know," she said softly. He took a step closer, and her heart began to race. They were standing in the middle of the pasture, surrounded by golden grass and grazing cattle, with the mountains rising blue and majestic in the distance. The moment felt suspended, precious. "I need to tell you something," Warren said, his voice low and rough. "I need you to know that staying here, working on this ranch, it hasn't been just about clearing my father's debt or doing the right thing. It has become about you. About the way you face every challenge with courage, the way you care for your brother, the way you make coffee so strong it could strip paint, but you are so proud of it that I would never tell you. It has become about how much I look forward to seeing you at breakfast, to hearing your laugh when Jacob says something foolish, to sitting with you on the porch in the evenings. I am falling in love with you, Penelope Turner, and I needed you to know." Penelope's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Warren," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know you might not feel the same way, and that is fine. I meant what I said that first day. You owe me nothing. Not your time, not your affection, not anything. But I wanted to be honest with you because you deserve honesty." "Stop talking," Penelope said, and when he fell silent, looking worried, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not a practiced kiss, not smooth or elegant. It was desperate and heartfelt, a release of weeks of tension and growing feeling. Warren made a sound of surprise, then his arms came around her, pulling her close as he kissed her back with a passion that stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Penelope rested her forehead against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart under her palms. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I have been trying not to, because it seemed foolish to fall for a man who was only here out of obligation. But if you are here because you want to be, because you care about me, then I don't have to hold back anymore." Warren's arms tightened around her. "I am here because I cannot imagine being anywhere else," he said fiercely. "You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, Penelope. You are strong and kind and beautiful, and I will stay here as long as you will have me." She pulled back to look up at him, seeing her own feelings reflected in his face. "Then stay," she said simply. "Stay and help us build this ranch into something worth having. Stay and let me get to know every part of you. Stay because this is home now for both of us." "Yes," Warren said, and kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise and hope. They stood there in the golden autumn sunlight, holding each other, while the cattle grazed peacefully around them and the mountains stood silent witness to the beginning of something new and precious. Jacob figured out what was happening between his sister and Warren within days, which wasn't surprising given that they couldn't seem to stop looking at each other with soft expressions and finding excuses to stand close together. To Penelope's relief, her brother seemed pleased rather than upset. "Warren is a good man," Jacob said to her one evening when Warren was out checking the horses, "and he makes you happy. I haven't seen you smile this much since before Ma died." "He does make me happy," Penelope admitted, feeling warmth bloom in her chest. "Is that selfish of me? We have so many problems still, so much work to do, and here I am falling in love like we have all the time and security in the world." "That isn't selfish," Jacob said firmly. "That is human. And you deserve it, Penny. You have sacrificed so much for me for this ranch. You deserve to have something just for you." Penelope hugged her brother tight, grateful for his understanding and maturity. He was growing up so fast, becoming a man before her eyes, and she was proud of him. As autumn deepened, and the first snows began to dust the mountain peaks, Warren officially asked Jacob for permission to court Penelope. It was an old-fashioned gesture, one that wasn't strictly necessary given that Penelope was a grown woman who could make her own choices. But it showed respect for Jacob's position as the man of the family, however young. Jacob gave his permission with a grin, and Warren celebrated by taking Penelope into Leadville for dinner at the hotel restaurant. Leadville was a bustling mining town perched high in the Rocky Mountains, at an elevation of over 10,000 feet. The silver boom had transformed it from a rough camp into a real town, with brick buildings, a fire department, and even an opera house. It was a wild place, full of miners and gamblers and fortune seekers, but it also had a vibrancy that Penelope found exciting after months of isolation on the ranch. Warren held her arm as they walked down Harrison Avenue, past the Grand Hotel and the Tabor Opera House. Penelope wore her best dress, a navy blue wool that had been her mother's, and Warren had cleaned up until he looked almost like a stranger in his pressed shirt and vest. Dinner was the finest meal Penelope had eaten in years. They had beef steak and potatoes, fresh bread with butter, and apple pie for dessert. They talked and laughed, telling each other stories from their childhoods, learning the small details that turned strangers into intimates. "I used to want to be a singer," Penelope confessed over pie. "When I was a girl, I would stand on the porch and sing to the mountains, imagining I was performing at a grand opera house." "Can you still sing?" Warren asked, his eyes warm. "I don't know," Penelope said. "I haven't tried in years." "Maybe you should," Warren said. "When we have something to celebrate, you can sing for us." "What would we be celebrating?" Penelope asked, smiling. "Anything we want," Warren said. "The first snowfall, a successful calving season, The fact that we survived another day in this beautiful, difficult place." He reached across the table and took her hand. "The fact that I found you." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "You are a romantic Warren Ellis." "Only with you," he said softly. The ride back to the ranch was cold, the November night crisp and clear. They rode close together, Warren's arm occasionally brushing against hers, and Penelope felt happier than she had in longer than she could remember. The future was still uncertain, the ranch still struggling, but with Warren beside her, she felt like they could face anything. Winter came hard and fast to the high country. By mid-November, snow lay thick on the ground and the temperature plummeted. The work became about survival, keeping the cattle fed, the pipes from freezing, the house warm. Warren had helped them prepare, stockpiling firewood and hay, but it was still a constant battle against the cold. On the worst days, when the wind howled down from the mountains and the snow fell so thick you couldn't see 10 feet in front of you, they huddled inside around the fire. Warren read aloud from the few books they owned, his deep voice turning simple adventure stories into grand epics. Jacob whittled, creating an army of small wooden animals. Penelope mended clothes and knitted, her hands never idle. On those long winter nights, Penelope and Warren would talk for hours after Jacob went to bed, sitting close together on the sofa, speaking in low voices about their dreams and fears. Warren told her about the places he had been, the things he had seen. Penelope told him about her mother, about the good years before the drought, about her hopes for the ranch. "I want to make this place thrive again," she said one night, her head resting on Warren's shoulder. "Not just survive, but really thrive. I want to rebuild the herd, maybe try breeding horses. I want Jacob to have a legacy, something to be proud of." "We will do it," Warren said with quiet confidence. "It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but we will do it together." "Together," Penelope echoed, and the word felt like a promise. On Christmas Eve, a warm spell broke the worst of the cold. Warren and Jacob went out hunting and returned with a wild turkey. Penelope roasted it with herbs she had dried from the summer garden, and they had a feast. Warren produced a bottle of wine he had been saving, and they toasted to family, to survival, to the future. After dinner, Jacob played a harmonica that had been their father's, the melancholy notes filling the small house. Then Warren looked at Penelope and said, "Will you sing for us?" She protested at first, embarrassed, but Warren's encouraging smile gave her courage. She stood and sang a hymn her mother had loved, her voice rusty from disuse but true. The notes filled the room, and when she finished, both Warren and Jacob were staring at her with wonder. "That was beautiful," Warren said, his voice rough with emotion. "Ma used to sing that," Jacob said quietly. "I had forgotten." Penelope felt tears on her cheeks, but they were good tears, the kind that came from remembering love rather than drowning in loss. Warren stood and took her in his arms, holding her close, and she felt surrounded by warmth and safety. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too," Warren said. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." They stayed like that for a long time, while Jacob played soft songs on the harmonica, and the fire crackled in the hearth, and outside the snow began to fall again, gentle and clean. January brought more snow and cold, but also a visitor. A man rode up to the ranch on a gray afternoon, bundled against the cold. Warren and Jacob were out dealing with a fence that had gone down under the weight of snow, so Penelope met the stranger at the door. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He introduced himself as Thomas Wright, a lawyer from Denver. "I am sorry to intrude, Miss Turner," he said, "but I have been trying to track down Warren Ellis for several weeks. I was told he might be here." Penelope invited him in, gave him coffee to warm him, and sent Jacob to fetch Warren. While they waited, Thomas Wright explained that he had been looking for Warren on behalf of his late father's estate. When Warren arrived, snow-covered and weary, Thomas stood and shook his hand. "Mr. Ellis, I have been searching for you for quite some time. Your father, before he died, was owed money by several people. Small amounts mostly, debts he had given up trying to collect. I have been settling those accounts, and the total comes to approximately $800. Warren went very still. $800? Yes, sir. It seems your father loaned money to people over the years, small sums to help them through hard times. He never pressed for repayment, but the debts existed nonetheless. I have collected what I could, and the money is rightfully yours." Warren sat down heavily at the table. $800. It was almost exactly the amount he had spent buying up Samuel Turner's debts and the price of the debt he had burned. "I don't understand," Warren said slowly. "My father died in debt himself. He didn't have money to loan to people." "He didn't loan them money," Thomas explained. "He loaned them credit, his labor, his time. And people, more often than you might think, remember such kindnesses and want to repay them when they can. It took me 2 years to track down all the people your father helped, but most of them were eager to settle their accounts once they knew you were his son." Penelope felt tears streaming down her face. Warren's father, the man who had died under the weight of unjust debt, had been spending his time and energy helping others. And now, years after his death, that kindness was returning to his son. Warren's hands were shaking as he accepted the bank draft Thomas offered. "I don't know what to say." "Your father was a good man," Thomas said simply. "The world has a way of remembering that eventually." After Thomas left, promising to file the proper papers and send the official documentation, Warren sat at the table staring at the bank draft. Penelope and Jacob gave him space, sensing he needed time to process this unexpected turn of events. Finally, Warren looked up at them, his eyes bright with unshed tears. $800, he said. "The exact amount I spent trying to clear his name. It is like he is reaching back from beyond death to tell me it was all worth it." "It was worth it," Penelope said softly. "Not just because of the money, but because of what you did with it. You freed me, Warren. You gave me and Jacob a chance to keep our home. Your father would be proud of you." Warren stood and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. She held him while he shook with silent sobs, years of grief and anger finally releasing. Jacob came and put his arms around both of them, and they stood there together, a makeshift family bound by loss and love, and the strange ways that kindness echoes through time. That night, after Jacob had gone to bed, Warren and Penelope sat by the fire. Warren had composed himself, but there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before, as if a weight he had carried for years had finally lifted. "I want to put that money into the ranch," he said. "All of it. We can rebuild the herd, fix what needs fixing, maybe even hire another hand come spring. We can make this place what you dreamed of." "Warren, that is your money," Penelope protested. "Your father's legacy." "My father's legacy is kindness," Warren said firmly. "And the kindest thing I can do with it is invest it in our future. Yours, mine, and Jacob's. This ranch, this life we are building together, that is what matters now." Penelope took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Our future," she said. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Warren said. He turned to face her fully, and there was a seriousness in his expression that made her heart skip. "Penelope Turner, I know we have only known each other a few months. I know it is fast, maybe too fast by some standards. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build this ranch together, raise a family together, grow old together. Will you marry me?" Penelope felt joy bloom in her chest, so intense it almost hurt. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course, yes." Warren kissed her, deep and passionate, and she kissed him back with all the love she felt. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have a ring," he said. "But I will get you one, I promise." "I don't need a ring," Penelope said. "I just need you." They sat together by the fire, making plans and dreaming dreams until the fire burned down to embers and the cold began to creep back in. Even then, wrapped in each other's arms, Penelope felt nothing but warmth. They were married in February of 1884 in a simple ceremony at the church in Leadville. Jacob stood up with Warren, and the minister's wife stood up with Penelope. A few neighbors attended, people who had known the Turner family for years and were glad to see Penelope finding happiness after so much loss. Penelope wore a dress she had made herself from fabric Warren had bought her as a courting gift, a soft green wool that brought out her eyes. Warren wore a new suit, and he looked so handsome that Penelope could hardly believe he was real, that this was really happening to her. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Warren kissed her with such tenderness that several of the attending women dabbed at their eyes. The small reception afterward was held at the hotel, with cake and punch and dancing. Penelope danced with Warren, with Jacob, with some of the neighboring ranchers who wished them well. She felt like she was floating, joy making her giddy. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, in a room that was warm and private. Warren was gentle and patient, understanding that this was new for Penelope, taking his time to make sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, talking softly, sharing the kind of intimacy that went beyond the physical. "I never thought I would be this happy," Penelope confessed, her head on Warren's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "After my mother died, after my father started to fall apart, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people. But here I am, married to a man I love beyond measure with a future that looks bright instead of bleak." "We both deserve this happiness," Warren said, his hand stroking her hair. "We have both been through enough darkness. It is our turn for light." "Our turn for light," Penelope repeated. "I like that." They returned to the ranch the next day, to Jacob's teasing congratulations and a house that already felt more like a home than it ever had before. Life settled into a new rhythm, the rhythm of a married couple working side by side. Warren moved his things into Penelope's room, and they fell asleep each night in each other's arms, warm and content despite the winter cold. Spring came late to the high country, but when it finally arrived, it brought renewal. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that quickly turned green. Wildflowers bloomed across the meadows, painting the landscape in shades of yellow and purple and blue. The cattle, thin from the hard winter, began to gain weight on the rich spring grass. Warren and Jacob rode out to assess the herd, and the news was better than expected. They had lost only 3 head over the winter, a remarkably low number given how harsh the cold had been. With the money from Warren's father's estate, they bought additional cattle from a rancher who was selling out, bringing their herd up to a respectable size. Penelope planted a kitchen garden, her hands in the soil bringing a satisfaction that went beyond the practical. She was building something, nurturing life, investing in a future that was finally certain. Warren helped her build a chicken coop, and they bought laying hens, adding fresh eggs to their diet. By May, the ranch was humming with activity and life. Warren hired a drifter named Sam to help with the work, a quiet man in his 50s who knew cattle and didn't ask questions. With the extra help, They were able to accomplish in weeks what would have taken months. One evening in late May, Penelope had news to share. She waited until after dinner, after Jacob and Sam had retired to the bunkhouse they had fixed up, until it was just her and Warren sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "I am pregnant," she said simply, and watched Warren's face transform with joy. "Truly?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "Truly," she confirmed. "I think I am about 2 months along. The baby should come in late November or early December." Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt dampness on her neck where he pressed his face. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Penelope asked, though she could tell he was. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Warren said, pulling back to look at her, his gray eyes shining. "I am overwhelmed, terrified, and more joyful than I have ever been in my life. A baby, Penelope. We are going to be parents." They spent the rest of the evening talking about names and futures, about nurseries and cribs, and all the tiny details that suddenly seemed monumentally important. Warren was already planning, already worrying about providing well enough, about being a good father. Penelope calmed his fears, reminding him that they had each other, that love was the most important thing they could give their child. The next months passed in a blur of work and preparation. Penelope's body changed, swelling with new life, and Warren treated her like she was made of glass, constantly worried that she was doing too much. She laughed at his fears but secretly loved his protectiveness. Jacob was excited about becoming an uncle, already planning all the things he would teach the baby. He had grown several inches over the winter and summer, shooting up toward manhood, his voice deepening and his shoulders broadening. He worked alongside Warren and Sam with a competence that made Penelope proud. By August, the ranch was thriving. The cattle were healthy and numerous, the crops were good, and they had even managed to pay down some of the remaining small debts that had accumulated over the years. Penelope felt like they had finally turned a corner, like the curse of bad luck that had plagued her family had finally lifted. One day in late August, almost exactly a year since Warren had first ridden up to their door, they held a small celebration. Sam had caught fish in the nearby stream, and they had a feast with fresh trout, vegetables from the garden, and pie made from wild berries. As the sun set, they sat around the fire outside, full and content. "A year ago," Penelope said, looking around at their faces, "I thought my life was over. I thought I would be forced into a marriage I didn't want, would lose everything I cared about. And then Warren rode up and changed everything." "You changed everything," Warren corrected gently. "You were brave enough to accept help, wise enough to see potential instead of just obligation. You made this family, Penelope." "We all made it," Jacob said. "Even Sam, who showed up a few months ago and decided to stick around." Sam, who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. "A man knows when he has found a good place," he said simply. "This is a good place." They all agreed, raising their cups in a toast to the ranch, to family, to the future. November came with the first snows, and with it came labor pains. Penelope's baby decided to arrive 3 weeks early, during a snowstorm that made it impossible to fetch the doctor from Leadville. Warren rode through the storm to get the nearest neighbor, a woman named Martha who had delivered many babies over the years. Martha arrived calm and capable, taking charge of the situation with a confidence that eased everyone's fears. Warren paced outside the bedroom door, nearly out of his mind with worry, while Jacob and Sam tried to distract him with cards and conversation. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. But finally, as dawn broke over the snow-covered mountains, a baby's cry filled the house. Warren burst into the room to find Penelope exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "It is a boy," she said, her voice hoarse but full of joy. "We have a son, Warren." Warren approached the bed as if in a dream, looking down at the impossibly small baby in his wife's arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was screaming with impressive lung power. Warren reached out a finger and the baby's tiny hand grasped it, holding tight. "Hello, son," Warren said softly, and the baby stopped crying as if recognizing his father's voice. "Welcome to the world." They named him Samuel Jacob Ellis, after both of his grandfathers. Little Sam, as they called him, was a healthy, hungry baby who demanded attention and gave love in equal measure. Warren was a devoted father, walking the floor with Sam at night so Penelope could sleep, changing diapers without complaint, staring at his son with such obvious adoration that it made Penelope's heart swell. Jacob was equally smitten with his nephew, constantly wanting to hold him and play with him. Even Sam, the ranch hand, softened around the baby, carving him toys and singing to him in a surprisingly pleasant voice. That first winter with a baby was challenging. Sam was colicky and didn't sleep well, and the work of the ranch didn't stop just because they were exhausted. But they managed, all of them pulling together, taking turns so no one person was overwhelmed. Spring came again, and Sam grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, smiling baby who laughed at everything and everyone. Penelope recovered her strength, and life found a new rhythm. The ranch continued to thrive, and they talked about expanding further, maybe buying the adjacent property that was going up for sale. One evening in May, when Sam was 6 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Penelope and Warren sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Penelope asked. "When you rode up here to collect on a debt?" "All the time," Warren said. "I think about how close I came to riding away, to just burning the papers and disappearing. I had the match in my hand, ready to set them on fire and leave, never looking back." "What made you stay?" Penelope asked. Warren was quiet for a moment. "When I burned those papers, when I told you that you owed me nothing but time, I saw something in your face. Not just relief, but hope. Like you had been holding your breath for so long and could finally exhale. I wanted to be part of that hope. I wanted to see where it would lead." "It led here," Penelope said, gesturing at the ranch, at the house where their son slept, at the life they had built together. "To everything I never knew I wanted but now can't imagine living without." "Same," Warren said simply. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I spent so many years being angry, being driven by the need to make things right. And then I met you, and I realized that making things right didn't mean fixing the past. It meant building a future worth having." "I love you," Penelope said, the words as natural as breathing. "I love you too," Warren said. "More than yesterday, less than tomorrow." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. From inside the house, baby Sam made a small sound, not quite a cry, just a letting them know he was their noise. Penelope smiled, ready to go to him, but Warren stopped her. "I will get him," he said. "You rest." He went inside, and Penelope heard his voice, soft and soothing, talking to their son. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes, feeling the warmth of the late afternoon sun on her face. She thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The loss, the pain, the impossible debt, the cowboy who had ridden up and changed everything. Time, she thought. Warren had said she owed him nothing but time, and she had given it gladly. Time to know him, time to love him, time to build a life together. And now they had all the time in the world stretching out before them like the vast Colorado landscape, full of possibility and promise. The years passed in the way years do when life is full and good, quickly but richly. Little Sam grew from a baby into a toddler, then into a sturdy little boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. He followed Warren and Jacob around the ranch, learning about cattle and horses and the rhythms of the land. When Sam was 2, Penelope became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and the birth, while still difficult, was faster. They welcomed a daughter in the spring of 1887, naming her Rose Martha Ellis after wild roses and the woman who had helped deliver Sam. Rose was a quieter baby than Sam had been, content to watch the world with serious dark eyes. She was her father's shadow from the moment she could walk, toddling after Warren with complete devotion. Warren, who had thought he couldn't love anyone more than he loved Penelope and Sam, found his heart expanding to encompass his daughter with a fierce protectiveness that sometimes made him ache. The ranch continued to prosper. They bought the adjacent property, expanding their holdings and their herd. Jacob, now 21, took on more responsibility, essentially running a third of the operation himself. He had become a fine cattleman with the knowledge and instincts that came from years of hard work and good teaching. Sam, the ranch hand, had become part of the family, staying on year after year, as permanent a fixture as the mountains themselves. He never talked much about his past, and they never pressed him, content to accept him as he was. In 1888, when Sam was 3 and Rose was 1, Jacob announced he was courting a girl from Leadville, the daughter of a shopkeeper. Her name was Emma, and she was sweet and sensible, with a laugh that could light up a room. Warren and Penelope welcomed her warmly, glad to see Jacob finding happiness. Jacob and Emma married in the spring of 1889, and Emma moved to the ranch. She and Penelope became close friends, and having another woman around eased some of the burden of work. Emma was a skilled seamstress and a talented baker, and she brought a gentle domesticity to the ranch that balanced the harder edges of frontier life. Little Sam started school in Leadville that fall, riding in with Warren or Jacob several times a week. He was bright and curious, soaking up reading and arithmetic with an ease that made Penelope proud. Rose was still too young for school but showed signs of being just as smart, figuring out puzzles and problems that seemed beyond her years. In 1890, Penelope had another baby, another boy they named William Thomas Ellis. He was a sunny-natured child from the start, always smiling, easy to please. With 3 children and a thriving ranch, the house was full of noise and life and love. One evening, when William was a few months old, Warren and Penelope found a rare moment alone on the porch. The children were inside with Emma and Jacob, and the sounds of laughter drifted out into the twilight. 7 years, Warren said, shaking his head in wonder. 7 years since I rode up here, terrified I would find some broken, desperate woman I would have to save from a situation neither of us wanted. And instead, you found me, Penelope said with a smile. And instead, I found everything, Warren corrected. A partner, a love, a family, a home. Everything I didn't know I was looking for. Do you ever regret it? Penelope asked. The money you spent, the debt you canceled, that was a lot to give up for strangers. You were never strangers, Warren said firmly. From the moment I learned about your father's situation, about how he had been trapped by the same kind of predatory lending that killed my father, you were connected to me. And no, I don't regret it. Not for a single second. That money bought me the best life I could have imagined. Penelope leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. I used to dream about being free, she said quietly. When my father was dying, when I thought I would be forced into marriage with some cruel stranger, I would dream about what freedom would feel like. but I never imagined it would feel like this. Like being so connected to people I love that I am never truly alone. Like having responsibilities I choose rather than ones forced on me. Like being seen and valued for who I am, not what I can provide. That is what freedom should be, Warren said. The ability to choose your own path, your own loves, your own life. I gave you that initial choice, but you are the one who made it into this. You built this family, this ranch, this life. I am just lucky enough to be part of it. We built it together, Penelope insisted. Every fence post, every calf, every meal, every moment. Together. Together, Warren agreed and kissed the top of her head. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing changes and growth. Sam grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved the ranch and showed every sign of wanting to take it over someday. Rose was wild and free, more comfortable on a horse than in a dress, with a gift for working with animals that impressed even Warren. William was the peacemaker, always smoothing over conflicts between his siblings, always finding ways to make people smile. Jacob and Emma had children of their own, first a daughter named Lucy, then twin boys they named Daniel and David. The ranch house expanded to accommodate the growing family, rooms added on as needed. It became a sprawling, comfortable place, always full of children and laughter and life. In 1895, when Sam was 11, Rose was 8, and William was 5, Penelope found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the others, her body older and more tired. Warren worried constantly, hovering over her in a way that was both annoying and endearing. Their fourth child, a daughter they named Grace Ellen Ellis, arrived in the winter of 1896. The birth was difficult, and afterward, the doctor told them there would likely be no more children. Penelope, exhausted and holding her tiny daughter, found she was okay with that. 4 children were enough, more than enough. Her family was complete. Grace was a miracle baby, small and delicate, but with a spirit that was anything but fragile. She had Warren's gray eyes and Penelope's stubborn chin, and from the moment she arrived, she wrapped the entire family around her little finger. As the century turned, as 1899 became 1900, the Turner Ellis Ranch was one of the most successful in the county. They ran cattle across thousands of acres, employed several ranch hands, and were respected members of the community. Jacob had become a full partner in the operation, and Sam, now 16, was learning the business side of ranching, preparing to take on more responsibility. Warren, now 44, had silver threading through his dark hair, and lines crinkled around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. Penelope, 38, had a few gray hairs of her own and hands that showed the wear of hard work. But they were happy, deeply and fundamentally happy, in a way that made all the struggles worthwhile. One evening in the spring of 1900, they stood together on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. Sam was teaching William how to rope a fence post, while Rose rode her horse in circles, showing off for her younger sister Grace, who clapped with delight. In the distance, Jacob's children were visible playing near the bunkhouse, their laughter carrying on the wind. "You know what I think about sometimes," Warren said, his arm around Penelope's waist. "What?" she asked, leaning into his warmth. "That first day when I told you that you owed me nothing but time. I think about how I had no idea what I was really asking for. Time turned out to be everything. Time to fall in love. Time to build a life. Time to raise children and watch them grow. Time to figure out who we were meant to be together. Time is the greatest gift," Penelope agreed. "I gave you my time and you gave me yours, and look what we built with it." Warren turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "I would do it all again," he said seriously. Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of fear or pain. I would do it all again because it led me here to you, to this life. So would I, Penelope said, tears shining in her eyes. I was promised as payment for a loan, but what I got was freedom. You canceled the debt and asked only for my time, and in giving you that time, I found everything I ever wanted. Warren kissed her, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 17 years of love and partnership. When they broke apart, both smiling, their children had noticed them and were making exaggerated gagging noises, the way children do when parents are being affectionate. All right, Warren called out, laughing. Go back to your playing. But Sam, their eldest, came up onto the porch, now almost as tall as his father. When I get married someday, he said seriously, I want to have what you two have. I want to look at my wife the way you look at Mom. Warren clapped his son on the shoulder, pride shining in his face. That is a good goal, son. The best goal there is. Penelope hugged Sam, breathing in the scent of horse and sunshine that clung to him. You will find it, she said. When you are ready, when the time is right, you will find someone who sees you for who you are and loves you for it. That is what real love is. Sam hugged her back, then returned to his siblings, and Penelope and Warren stood together, watching their family, their ranch, their life. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and purple. The air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed, a peaceful sound that spoke of prosperity and security. We did it, Penelope said softly. We took nothing and made it into everything. We did, Warren agreed. And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us still, more time to spend together, more memories to make. More time, Penelope echoed and smiled. They stood together on the porch of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their love and hard work, and watched the sun set on another day in their extraordinary, ordinary life. The debt that had once bound Penelope had been canceled long ago, replaced by bonds of love and choice and partnership. Warren had said she owed him nothing but time, and time had proven to be the most valuable currency of all. They had spent it wisely, investing it in each other, in their children, in a life that was richer than any amount of money could buy. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge in the vast Colorado sky, they went inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Behind them, the ranch settled into evening quiet, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over obligation, freedom over debt, and time over everything else. The story that had begun with a cowboy riding up to collect a debt had become a love story for the ages, simple and profound, full of the kind of quiet heroism that came from building a good life day by day, choice by choice, moment by precious moment. And as Warren and Penelope Ellis settled in for the night, surrounded by their sleeping children and the life they had created, they knew with absolute certainty that they had found something rare and precious. A love that had transformed them both, a partnership that had made them stronger, and a happiness that would last all the days of their lives.